Hi, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. My name is Michael Broadbent, and I'm the product manager of ArcGIS Workflow Manager. And with me today is Arthi Dwarakanath, one of our lead product engineers.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Today, we're going to be primarily looking at our new and exciting service-driven architecture and 3 different use cases that will offer a little bit of something for everyone. We'll be looking at submission and approval workflows for the web, so things like permitting, incident reporting, data submission and request. We'll look at data editing for the utility network, Parcel Fabric, or pipeline referencing, performing things like handling new data input, service drops, infrastructure build-outs from design to construction. As well, we'll look at automated orchestration. So do you want a system that does most of the work for you and only brings it to a person's attention when they're needed? Let us show you the way with Workflow Manager, and we'll wrap up with a bit of building up these workflows, monitoring the work in progress, and some of our future roadmap as well. Let's kick it off by introducing a bit of who we are. So we're Esri's solution for helping organizations become more productive by automating and simplifying repeatable GIS and non-GIS work. Repeatable processes tend to follow this simple 4-stage pattern where work is submitted, the submission is reviewed, it's completed, and the results are delivered. The steps to perform this work may be on the web or in desktop, they may occur in a distributed work environment, or they may include a mixture of automated activities. They may use different people with different levels of training and understanding and different software products. Once you have a process like this modeled out, it can be challenging to scale it so that you can perform it 100 times, 1,000 times successfully. Often bottlenecks get magnified and the process slows down. Mistakes happen, quality drops. And this is where Workflow Manager comes in to streamline a production process and act as the orchestration factory, improving quality and trust in the process and reducing a lot of the manual repetitive work so that users can focus on work that's impactful and meaningful to them. Additionally, by capturing the business process, we're also capturing the tradecraft that goes into it. So it's easier to onboard new staff and it's less devastating to lose one. What makes us different is our spatial nature. So we use the work's location effectively in our analysis and reporting, and we're tightly integrated with ArcGIS. So we've historically released a geodata-based deployment known as Workflow Manager Classic, primarily focused on cadastral mapping workflows. This deployment is still supported and successful. If you're using it today, we hope you're loving it and benefiting from all the work we put in last year, finishing off parity for Classic as a pro-only solution. Last year, we also released the new service-driven deployment focused on new use cases, tight integration with ArcGIS Enterprise, and areas of differentiation so that we can mature the new technology gradually. If you're using Classic, it may be appropriate to consider transitioning depending on your use case and feature requirements. And if you're new to us, we ask that you think about some of the use cases you'll see today in the service-driven architecture and what it can do for you now and in the future. Our ultimate vision is to allow organizations to create their own seamless end-to-end workflows across ArcGIS for completing their work. Whether processes take people from the web to mobile, to desktop, or through purely automated activities and out again, we want to become the glue to ArcGIS technology, the nervous system to your repeated processes through the ecosystem. To back this vision, we released the service-driven architecture. It is a new capability server with instances of Workflow Manager available as workflow items. We have a new web app with web pages focused on specific tasks like performing, monitoring, and administrating work. We have a new Pro extension for those performing editing and analysis in Pro, while still maintaining extensibility opportunities for those of you who want to build your own apps and widgets that leverage the server as an underlying architecture and framework. Users of the system are licensed not via the server itself, but via their own user type extension licenses, just like you would see in utilities or parcel mapping. So the benefits of this new architecture include performance, not just in the speed of the actions, which are faster, but also in the responsiveness of our applications. A lot of the ease of use, so it's really quite simple to get started and build these workflows and move them into production quickly. Focused on resiliency and deployability, making it easier to upgrade and get this technology moved into your organization. Increased focus on platform integration, as well as a lot of new capabilities, which we'll be discussing today. So let's dive into one of those use cases focused on the area of submission and approval workflows. So these are typically good examples of the four-stage submit, review, complete, and deliver process that is common in most organizations. Some uses are taking in boundary or address adjustments, permit requests, also taking in data submissions from partners or contractors, or just requests for data from your own organization. We'll look at an example of a permit submission and review. I'd like to show you how, with just a little bit of GIS analysis, we can guide the submitter to completing the appropriate form information without the organization having to perform any additional work. So in a use case like a permit, it might be relevant if the work was close to a water source. And if it wasn't, they could complete their submission. But if it was, they might have to fill in some additional information. We don't have a lot of time for this demo, so we'll focus primarily on just the submitter submitting their permit request. And we'll also see some of the new integration with ArcGIS Survey 123. Arthi, take it away.
Thanks, Michael. You can easily access Workflow Manager from ArcGIS Enterprise. Once you have your workflow server configured and your license set up, just look for the Workflow Manager icon in the app launcher for ArcGIS Enterprise portal. Clicking on it will take you to our Open Item page. This is where you'll access items that were created for you or create a new item. For this demo, I'll be using an existing item. Once in, you'll be taken to our work page. And like the name suggests, this is where all the work happens. On the work page, you can find, filter, and run work that is assigned to you. You can see that I have two job queries, my jobs and my group jobs, to easily find jobs that are assigned to me or my group. We have out-of-the-box filters available here to filter through some of our jobs. High priority that tells you jobs that have a high priority, jobs that were created in the last 24 hours, or jobs that are past their due date. You can also see that there are a few jobs that are already assigned to me. I can either start a new step or resume a step that I was working on yesterday. For our demo today, I'll be creating new work using the Create Job panel. You can find the Create Job panel on the left here. You'll see a few different job types available here for us to create jobs off of. For today's demo, I'll be creating a submission process for an environmental review. The work page will automatically update to show me the new job that is now ready for me to be worked on. And just like a regular submission process, I'll be asked to fill out some information here. We'll put in our name, the area that we'll be working in. You'll notice that the Proceed button is grayed out. This is because the required fields haven't been filled out. As soon as I fill out the required fields, the Proceed button will be enabled. Let's fill out all the other information that's on here. All right, we'll proceed to our next step. This is a real quick way to gather business-specific information related to our process. And not just that, you can also now quickly update default job properties like the start date, the due date, the priority, and status using this step. And everything that you see on here is all configured by my admin. While this feature is useful, we do recognize and understand that it may not fulfill all the needs for data validation. And so for that, At 10.9, we introduced integration with Survey 123. This brings in all of the Survey 123 capabilities like constraining, validating, and all the different fields that are supported by Survey 123. You can see that my email address is being validated as I type. You can also add multiple pages, capture digital signature, and utilize all of the cool functionality offered by Survey 123 without ever leaving Workflow Manager. Let's go ahead and sign our submission. And voila, my survey has now been submitted. Before we move on to the next step, I want to show you that when I submitted the survey, not only did it create a survey record, but it also linked the survey record with this job. And so you can see our first step that we filled out, and then the survey form that we filled out. This is useful because now these properties can be used anywhere in the workflow to act as an input for steps like emails, GP services, and guide a decision using arcade expression. And beyond Survey 123, this capability can be extended to integrate with feature layers as well. All right, we'll move on to defining a location now, and I'll pick an area that should be fairly wet. And locations don't always have to be polygons. They can be points, polylines. You can also select existing features to be the location for your job. All right, we'll move on to our next step here. Another new feature that we added at 10.9 is linked attachments. This can be a link to your shared or network drive, or link to an FTP or a OneDrive website. For this demo, I'll be adding an embedded attachment, which is a PDF document with information about my construction plan. Let's move on. Now, we've collected a lot of information in the past few minutes. Our location and properties will now be automatically evaluated to see if they're in proximity to any critical layers using a GP service. And looks like our area of construction is within 50 feet of wetland. No surprises here. And based on the result of my GP service, I will now be tasked to complete a few more steps and answer a few more questions here. So we'll go ahead and fill that out. And we'll move on to our next step. Before we submit our submission, I want to take a moment to take a look at the job details panel. The properties that we just filled out are a little bit different from the initial project information we collected. These are one-to-many properties. What that means is these properties can have multiple values for this one job. For example, if a field crew is being sent out to do some maintenance work, these fields will have different values before and after the maintenance, but they're all associated with this one request. You can add and edit those values using the same job details panel. All right, now that our request is submitted, it looks like an email confirmation was sent out. Let's see if we actually got that email. This email was automatically sent out when our submission was submitted. As you can see, the email captured some of the job-related information like the job name, the proximity to the wetlands automatically. This was done using arcade expressions. Information captured in Workflow Manager is saved under the hood to be used as input for different steps throughout the job. We'll learn a little more about it in our next demos. Back to you, Michael.
All right, thanks, Arthi. So you saw a little bit of the submission process. gathering information from the submitter, performing some of the GP analysis to guide them based on the submission's location. So we saw that because the submission was in close proximity to water, the submitter had to populate extra form information, which they did with some of our new Survey 123 integration. And then we saw how some of that information could be used and extracted into emails that are sent to the submitter, but they could also be sent within the organization as well. After the submission stage, that work would now continue on to the review stage, and if the review passed, the request could be completed and delivered as an end-to-end process constructed in Workflow Manager. So just think of all the ways you gather your information to perform work in GIS. How do you vet it? How do you work with the requests that come in? What are your steps to getting things done? After a while, you'll realize just how common this type of workflow really is. This submit, review, complete, and deliver workflow. And the submission stage doesn't have to always be entered manually. It could be programmatically generated from another system, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation. All right, let's carry on to our next use case around data editing for the utility network, Parcel Fabric, and also pipeline referencing. So it was very important for us to create a service-driven workflow manager to match the new service-driven data structures that exist and really create an experience that could orchestrate these types of workflows across Pro and the web seamlessly. So there really are a lot of data editing activities that are possible in this type of scenario. So you can have things like service drops or changeouts, different map corrections or route and event updates, all the way to infrastructure design and construction workflows as well. In this scenario that Arthi will present, we're going to ingest a newly installed fire hydrant using ArcGIS Pro and QC it on the web. And all this was triggered by a webhook in Survey 123 that was used by the field crew. And that's right, we can now handle Survey 123 webhooks automatically within Workflow Manager. With that, I will turn it over to Arthi. Arthi?
Thanks, Michael. We'll go back to our work page again. And as Michael mentioned, the field crew submission triggered job creation in Workflow Manager. This job was automatically created using webhooks, which is why all of the survey information is already linked to the job and ready for me to review. And since I'm only reviewing this information, the survey was opened in view-only mode. I will proceed to my next step. I'll add some comments for tracking purposes, just like I did on my previous job. A version was created automatically for this job, and all the steps assigned to me now are done, and this job has now been reassigned to the editors group. Let's change our scenery a bit and access the same Workflow Manager item in Pro. This time, we'll log in as one of the editors who primarily works in ArcGIS Pro, updating and editing different data using all the different mapping capabilities available in Pro. To connect to your Workflow Manager item here, create a connection to your portal, and then look for the Workflow Manager icon on the View ribbon. Clicking on the Workflow pane will open up the Workflow pane. You can see the Workflow pane has some predefined search queries similar to what we saw on the work page. These searches are all dynamic and can be adjusted to one's needs. For example, I have mine set up to easily find jobs that are assigned to the network analyst group. On that note, I see a job ready for me to work on. So once I run this step, it will automatically update the assignment from the group to me. The step that I just ran here is called the Open Pro Item step. This step will automatically open a pre-configured map. It will zoom in to the job's location for the new fire hydrant. And last but not the least, it will repoint all the layers in the map to the new version created specifically for this job. Because we know better than to make edits directly to the default version. By doing some of the heavy lifting, Workflow Manager makes it really easy for me to focus on my task at hand, which is to make my edits to add a new fire hydrant. I'll use my pre-configured utility editing template to add this hydrant. And because I'm using this editing template, some of my attribute values have automatically been populated. I think I'm done making my edits, so we'll go back to the workflow pane and mark this step as finished. I'll save my edits before we move on, of course. As a part of finishing this step, Workflow Manager will automatically close the map and reset it back to its original state. Looks like there are more steps for me to run, so I'll go on and continue with my job. Add some comments here for my QC person. All right, proceed to our next step. I think my edits were solid, so we'll go ahead and submit. And while I was making these edits, I got an email notification about a new job that is now assigned to me. So I'll go back to my jobs, and here it is. Before I run the next step, I would like to show Pro and the Workflow Manager web application side by side here to see how they get updated at the same time. The service-based architecture allows for all instances of work to be updated in real time. And so multiple people can work in the same system and consume all of the same information at the same time. This is really helpful when your workforce is located in different locations. We'll go back to Pro now. This job is similar to our previous one in that it's using the same map, but you can right away tell there's some big differences. The job's location is different. The version where all the layers have been repointed to are also different. Workflow Manager makes it really easy to switch between different jobs and work on them at the same time. I won't make any edits right now, and we'll come back to this at a later time. I'll take off my editor hat and go back to the work page, this time as a reviewer, to review edits. I see a job ready to be QC'd, and instead of Pro, I'll be using a web editing application to review the edits. Similar to Pro, a map is opened up with the job's version and is now zoomed in to the new feature that was added by my editor. This is a very simple review. In the real world, you could have the same map open up in Pro, run some validation rules using Arrow Inspector. We also have the Job Details panel available here on the right. You can see the different job properties associated with the job, like the survey record. We can take a look at the job's location. We can also look at all the attachments that were added along the way. If the job panel is taking too much room, you can always minimize it. We'll go ahead and finish this step, and we're automatically taken back to the work page. I'll say yes for reconcile and post. It looks like our reconcile and post GP step is on a scheduled hold. What that means is that this hold will be released at a scheduled time and the GP step will automatically be run at that time. We'll learn a little more about step scheduling in our next demo. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Arthi. So now you've seen one example of an edit carried through the field, to Pro and through the web for utilities use case. And you've seen just how seamless Workflow Manager can make that experience. Also notice how much of the manual repetitive preparation work was taken care of for the user. It was easier to transfer the work's responsibilities from field to the editing experience to the web QC. There were no issues finding or seeing the work's location, no issues repointing the job's version or opening the correct task to perform the work. There was instant synchronization between what the users in Pro see versus what the web sees. And we saw some of the use of the new step scheduling to retask certain actions to off-network hours. You also saw the interaction with field, picking up the Survey123 webhook to create the Workflow Manager job, which is what Arthi used to carry the job forward. Now, there may be use cases where in the workflow you want to task a field crew to perform some field work. This isn't something Arthi showed, but you can use that same open web app step experience that we have to open ArcGIS Workforce in ArcGIS Pro or the web app to task a field crew to perform some work related to the job. Over time, we will continue to enhance this experience for tight field integration as the new field app matures and includes ArcGIS Workforce. If you'd like to see another utilities-based example, the telecommunication team made a great YouTube video showing a network design, including the process of creating the design in Pro, tasking the field, performing the work, reviewing the results on the web as well. So I'd also encourage you to check out that sample as well, and I'll mention it again at the end of the presentation. Okay, let's switch gears to talk more about automatically orchestrated workflows. Specifically, automated data processing. So you can see the original 4-stage review process we modeled out, but now some of the activities are replaced by automated ones. So the submission of work could be made via web request, a webhook, or by monitoring something like an FTP site or other data sources for changes. The review could be automatic using geoprocessing, and the submission automatically reviewed and accepted or rejected. The completion could primarily be based on automated processes, but when required, retasked to a user when the process isn't working out. Like, for example, when you're trying to train a machine learning process or your automated attribute rule validation shows there are more complex errors than the automation can resolve. These concepts aren't for everyone, but they tend to be used in larger systems where Workflow Manager is the orchestration component in the center of it all, trying to create a more automated system where people are brought into the process only as required. These types of use cases may be appropriate. If you have a lot of data ingestion, really more than you can handle on your own, you work with a lot of partners or contractors taking in or providing contributions, or you have sudden flurries of activity that have tight delivery turnarounds. We'll continue to make new functionality to support these types of systems. Step scheduling, which Arthi showed a moment ago, is one such example. And I'll show you some more that are coming in our roadmap. The functionality that specifically supports automated systems falls under our advanced server role license and isn't available just with a user type extension. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit to the administration of this system. We've seen now some of the processes that we've built around some of the possible use cases, but how did we actually build those processes into workflows in Workflow Manager using some of our predefined step types and paths? Really, there's no better way to describe this than just going straight into a demonstration, so I'm going to kick it over to Arthi to show us how.
Thanks, Michael. Let's do a little change of scenery now. We'll go back to our web app. You'll notice that we have 2 new tabs here in addition to the work page, the design page and the manage page. And we'll get to the manage page in our next demo. In the last 2 demos, we ran 2 different jobs as 2 different users, one in the web app and the other one in Pro. Now we'll actually see how these diagrams were configured. The diagrams are configured on the design page. You see all of the different diagram types listed here on the left. We'll take a look at the diagram we used for the asset update workflow in ArcGIS Pro. To take a look at the step configuration, all you do is click on the Edit button on the design page for that diagram. Now, in a real-world scenario, an admin would set this up because it does require advanced privileges. You can see some of the initial steps we had, like Survey 123 that was opened in view-only mode. This survey was located on the same enterprise as Workflow Manager. That's not always the case. You can have your surveys on ArcGIS Online or a different enterprise. We then created a version for our editors to work in. We also opened up a pre-configured map in ArcGIS Pro. You can have this map open up with tasks or Error Inspector. This was new at 10.9. We then answered some questions. Now, in this case, if we had said no instead of yes, the job would have automatically rerouted back to the editor instead of the reviewer. Results from steps like these and GP services are stored under the hood in Workflow Manager as output values. These output values can be accessed at any point in the diagram using arcade expressions and used to guide multiple decisions throughout the project. We left our last demo with the GP step scheduled to run at 11 p.m. Step scheduling is a new feature at 10.9. In our diagram, we didn't really account for any failures or conflicts, and we all know these processes don't always go this smoothly. And so I added a new step called Wait on Failure step. In this case, if my GP step fails, my job will go to the Wait on Failure step, wait 2 minutes, run it, and then go back and try running the GP step again. Step scheduling makes it really easy to schedule long-running, resource-intensive processes to run after hours. Now that we've looked at an existing diagram, let's create our own and see how easy it is. I'll create a diagram for a vacation request process. I'll first map out my diagram using just manual steps. We will obviously want to collect some information from the person requesting the vacation. Once that's filled out, we'll ask them if they're ready to submit it. Once it's submitted, it will be reviewed by a manager. The manager will then either approve or deny it. And then, based on that decision, we will want to send out an email to all the parties involved. Now we'll overwrite these steps with proper steps to update the logic for it. So we'll have the update job property step to collect information from the user. This can also be a Survey 123 step. We can add our questions in. And last but not the least, we'll add our send email step. We'll add some path logic for our question steps here. Our diagram here needs a few more updates before it can be used in a job. But you can see how easy it was to get started. Starting at 10.9, you can also now add labels to your diagrams to provide further descriptions of your workflow. And once your diagram is ready, you can print it out and share it with the rest of your team for further consideration. Back to you, Michael.
That was great. Thanks, Arthi. So you got to see just how easy it is to build those workflows, visualize your process, get buy-in from stakeholders in your organization, and build it up from there in complexity to perform advanced functions and decision making. Okay, so now we've seen a lot of jobs get created around different processes and use cases, but how do we manage them and oversee them as a whole? Using our new Manage page. So this is where a production coordinator can go to evaluate the progress of work in the system using queries and searches, but with the additional ability to actually make changes to those jobs if they need to. So it's really like an advanced dashboard for coordination. And Arth is going to take us through a demonstration of how that works from the perspective of a production coordinator.
Thanks, Michael. Like I promised, we're back in our web application one last time, this time to talk about the Manage page. And just like the name suggests, this page is primarily used to monitor work and create work in your organization. Based on some usability feedback we've received, we've made quite a few changes here to make it more accessible. For example, we've added a new shortcut to quickly take a look at all the job searches that are shared with you. These are the same searches that we saw on the work page. Switching between these searches will update the job list. We still have the job panel available on the left here to look for specific jobs or create new jobs. You can see all the different job types available to us here. We also now have a new filter option to restrict the results that you're viewing. You can expand the job list to see more jobs available in the search. You can also change the view of the Manage page by showing just the job list, or have only the map show with all of the jobs locations. I prefer having them both visible at the same time. You can also bring up some of the job details by clicking on the job's location, or zooming into that job's location by using this button right here. Starting at 10.9, we added these colorful, easy-to-use summary charts to look at some of our job properties. These are all completely configurable, and you can set your own color schemes. You can hover over the charts to look at the different statuses and priorities. The number in the middle represents the number of the jobs in the job search for that particular status or priority. And we didn't stop there. The locations are all colorized now based on the different job properties. So if I click on the priority chart, you can very quickly see which of my jobs has a high priority. The Manage page can also be used to update existing jobs in your system. I can do so by using the Job Details panel that we saw on the work page. With the right privileges, I can click on the little pencil here and update different job properties like the priority, the start date, the due date, the status, the person who the step is assigned to, all of this using the Details panel. I can also view the diagram that is being used for this job. I can change the current step by using this option right here. I can view the location for my job that was defined. I can also view all the attachments that were added to my job. Clicking on them will either open them or download them. I can rename them, delete attachments. I can also add new attachments, whether they're linked or embedded, using the Details panel. It's important to remember that every button, every tab that you see here is all privilege control, and so you can block certain users from doing these actions by assigning them the appropriate privileges. I'll now use the Details panel to make some changes to a job that is assigned to my group. I can quickly find my job using the shortcut for my job searches, We'll use the Job Details panel to add a step hold on this job. Holds are a good way to stop people from running a step. Holds can be added for many reasons like budget constraints, technical issues, issue with resources. And once the hold is resolved, you can remove it by using the Release Step Hold button. This functionality is also privilege controlled. Manage Page is a good way to get an overall picture of everything that's going on in your organization. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Arthi. That was fantastic. And thanks again for all the great demos that you've done today. So you saw the Manage Page and some of the great features we offer production coordinators for managing and interacting with the jobs that are in progress. For simpler reporting views of jobs, though, it is also possible to tie in the underlying feature layers to ArcGIS dashboard and really just give simple heads-up displays of job activities as well. All right, so let's start to close it out here with a summary of some of our features and our direction in the roadmap. Here is just a small selection set of features we've presented today. Tracking work location, controlling user access and job assignment, capturing job properties, and integrating with GP tools, along with things like maps and apps, data, Survey 123, just to name a few. But we have a lot of exciting initiatives coming as well. So we have items of parity with the classic version of Workflow Manager like parent-child and job dependencies, commenting and notes. But we also have some exciting new features as well, like sending web requests through the workflow and being able to use the response to guide the workflow is one of my favorites. We also have future plans for webhook capabilities and integration, as well as next year we are targeting a new version of Workflow Manager that's available through ArcGIS Online. There are a lot of exciting things coming to Workflow Manager, but don't wait to get started. We always recommend organizations start with the lowest hanging fruit, simplest workflow that gives them the maximum value possible. And once it's in progress, you've seen so far today just how easy it is to upgrade it, find new ideas, and add to it from there. All right, to wrap up, we do have some extra resources available to help you on your Workflow Manager journey. So if you'd like to reach out, you can do so through the Esri community. It's a good place to post your ideas, post your questions, look at some of the supporting resources that we have available. Additionally, you can check out our new product page, which came out just a couple months ago, with some updated value propositions and extra content there. There's also the feature pages for the ServiceDriven Architecture, as well as the geodatabase deployment. So that's a good resource for help or extra contextual information about the technology itself. We do have some new blog content out as well, and we plan on creating new blogs regularly, so you can check those out on the ArcGIS blog site. We have some training seminars and videos available on YouTube to help you get started. There's also the telecommunication infrastructure design presentation that I mentioned before. It's another nice demo that can show you some of the use cases of Workflow Manager, in that case in utilities. And while we didn't talk about it that much today, we do have a Python API available. You can get more information about it on those links, including the specific calls as well as some samples. And we will continue to extend that over time. So at this point, it represents the end of our presentation today. We would like some of your feedback though, so there's a session survey link at the bottom of the video window. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for attending, and we will open it up now for an open question period to answer any of your follow-up questions. Thank you.